All right, guys, today I've got Jeremy Duggar on the podcast. Really enjoyed this time with Jeremy. He's pretty well known for the data set that he's been collecting from his archery shop in the Four Corners region over the last decade, talking to elk hunters, talking to deer hunters, and really factoring in the setups they're using. So the broadheads they're using, is it a fixed head or is it a mechanical? The weight of their arrows, how far they're shooting, if they recover the animal or they don't. He's been keeping all that data together, and Jeremy himself says that it is anecdotal to some extent. And this was my first perception of it when I heard Jeremy on a podcast, is I kind of wrote it off as anecdotal, but once I really listened to his logic and how he's been piecing together all this evidence over time, I think there's a lot to this, and Jeremy does a very good job of explaining it. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. I think you're probably, at least in the last 3 or 4 months, like the highest requested guest. And I've been catching several of your other podcasts that you've been on, where you go over a pretty unique data set that you have as a archery shop owner and operator. And it's pretty cool that you've taken the time to actually collect the data and try to analyze it, and let's say I guess I would call it like maybe dispel some myths, or at least give some context to a lot of this stuff. And that's my biggest challenge, Jeremy, is it's not just archery stuff, it's all hunting gear and everything in this world that we live in. It's hard to know what the truth is, and what's maybe hyperbole and all that. So it's nice to just hear from somebody that's actually talked to a bunch of archers and seen what's worked and what hasn't. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, you betcha. Good to be here, Cliff, for sure.
For sure. And Jeremy, do you mind just giving like the quick background of where you're at in the country, and what you do on the archery front?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm in the Four Corners, northern New Mexico, in Farmington, New Mexico. I own an archery shop there, Expert Archery, and I've been selling archery equipment in Farmington for 34 years. I started in late '91, and then through the grace of God, actually own my own shop now. So there's a big journey there, obviously, that we don't need to get into. But yeah, I've been an archery shop owner for around 20 years. Actually, it'd be yeah, around 20 years now. So, but I've been in a shop, working in a shop for a long time. So
Good deal. And dude, describe this data set. I don't want to dive into the actual nitty gritty of your, kind of your conclusions and views quite yet, but because I want to go over a couple other just things about archery setups with you, because I think you have unique perspective on. But let's start with you describing this data set that you're kind of known for.
yeah, sure thing. I'll just give a quick, kind of a simple overview. And so I started collecting the data about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was, I'll have to be honest, it was just a little bit, it started with a little bit of angst because as a shop owner or working in a shop, sometimes you get blamed for a lot of stuff that maybe is not necessarily your fault. And so what I wanted to do is start to collect data and try to prove actually that it wasn't the stuff, that it was more the responsibility of the archer in the woods that was, creating the success or creating the failure. And so I decided I was going to collect bow poundage. I was going to collect arrow weight, shot distance, whether it was a mechanical or a fixed blade head, not specific brand, just mechanical or fixed. And then at the end of that, whether it was a wounded animal that wasn't recovered or if it was a kill, an animal that was recovered. And so the way I collected the data, I tried to do it as anonymous as possible. And so when a customer would come in and start to tell me their hunting stories, I would listen to the hunting story and then I would ask questions to extract the data so that when that consumer left, they didn't know that they participated in a survey. And
Sure.
so I would then, when they left, I would write it down. Also, I've got a really powerful point of sale system. So almost all of my customers are in there with a profile. So it shows, what type of bow they're using, shows we put in the poundage, we put in the draw length, we put in the arrow build. So a lot of that stuff honestly really came down to how far was the shot and whether it was a wounded animal not recovered or whether it was a kill. And then I had a lot of that other stuff in the computer I could go to get that data. So anyway, we put that on a kind of a spreadsheet. My daughter helped me out with that in the shop, and we've collected over 500 sample sets in like 6 years. Now we're able to extract whatever statistic that we want out of that data. So that's kind of the basic foundation of it.
Yeah, and it's super interesting, man. And you hit on something there that I think is really important, at least to touch on, man. It's really hard in the hunting world to get accurate data, or even something that's, you know, even like remotely accurate, I guess we call it, because people, I wouldn't say people necessarily lie, but people a lot of times will they'll withhold information. You know what I mean, Jeremy? Particularly, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, man. Like when I was outfitting, I'd be packing out some archers out of a drop camp or something, and when I picked them up, no shots were fired. But after a 4 hour horseback ride, I'd find out that a bull got wounded, and they'd been spending the last 4.5 days trying to find it. You know what I mean? And
Yes, sir.
and
Yeah.
I get people. It's not like I get it. I totally get it. Like some topics are not the most fun thing to talk about, so it's hard, man. I'm sure you probably got a pretty good way of like teasing information out from people, so you kind of knew the real deal.
Yeah, I feel like I did. And I feel like for the most part, it's a bit anecdotal, obviously, but I mean, I feel
Sure.
like for the most part, it's pretty accurate. I mean, there's going to be a little bit maybe that's iffy, but I think for the most part, I feel good about it.
Right.
I've had people after these podcasts reach out to me and email me and private message me with data, and
Sure.
if somebody sends, data that shows 72 kills and no wounds, like I'm not even
Yeah. Yeah.
entertaining. And so, there has been only, and I'll say this too to your audience, like almost all of this, it's almost 100% is from my shop and extracted from blue collar, hardworking bow hunters. Okay. And the very few sample sets that I've been okay with adding from online have been obviously have been honest because there's wounds, there's kills. I mean, one guy sent me a spreadsheet of how far the animal went after it was hit and stuff that I didn't need. Right, it was a very complete set, so I could look through and go, hey, this feels right. Like this guy's being honest about it. You know what I mean? But that's been a very tiny, tiny, tiny part of the sample. It's mostly from my shop.
Sure. Guys, Biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my discount code CLIFFG, CLIFFG for 15% off at checkout and to support this content. Thanks, guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, in addition to that, dude, I can appreciate the fact that you even call it like somewhat anecdotal. And the way I look at all this data, because man, I've really tried to dig in on the firearm side and the archery side. Like, where's the scientific study on this stuff? And the reality is, it just doesn't exist. It's all anecdotal, and unfortunately, man, like there's a lot of stuff out there that's portrayed as not anecdotal, that like portrayed as real science, that's total bullshit when you like dig into it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not working in like a, like double blind placebo test type of world in the hunting perspective. So I think a data set like yours is pretty valuable, man. Um, let's before we get into it though, as an archery owner, let's talk about some of these choices that guys have to make, and the big ones that come to we'll just go through them. The biggest
Okay.
one that seems to be, and maybe this is recent, at least in my mind, it is this giant debate of, light arrow setups, heavy arrow setups, and then in between.
Mhm.
Just so the audience understands, Jeremy, because I'm sure you have an opinion about it as somebody with this data set and all of that. But can you give an overview of like what are the pros and cons between, like, when a guy's making that choice? A lot of folks don't even really know well, what do I gain from a heavy setup? What do I gain from a light setup? Do you mind just covering that real quick?
Yeah, no problem at all. So I can probably start the illustration of it by telling you what sample sets I decided to collect or what data
Sure.
I decided to collect. So I went from so the first one was 400, anything up to 400 grain arrow. which in today's world would be considered light. So under 400 grains, 400 and under. And then I did a sample set that was 401 to 450, which in today's landscape, that's considered, I would consider that moderate. And then I did everything that'd be in the middle. And then I did 451 to 500, which would be considered moderately heavy. And then I did 500 plus, which would be considered heavy. So I was trying to extract four different poundage ranges to gain statistic off of. And so once again, 400 under is light, 400 to 450 is moderate, 450 to 500 is moderately heavy, over 500 is heavy. And so at that point, so do you want to just jump into pros and cons of what I feel like?
Yeah. Well, and
Oh,
you know what?
okay.
What might be interesting, Jeremy, because like, and we can talk about the data set too, because it might be hard, to for context for folks. But I guess the pros and cons that may or may not be true, because it's hard for me to it's like the heavy arrow thing for me, Jeremy. Like I've been playing with it personally. I've always shot an arrow like right around 460 grains or whatever, and then I've moved in the last couple of years. I've tried like the high 500s, like around 600. And the thing is that I don't, because I can't test it myself. It's not like I'm out shooting, 50 elk with that setup. I don't even know if the perceived pros of that are reality or not. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
do you mind
Yeah.
just like touching on that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll start by saying that, like, when the debate happens, and the debate is rampant, right? It's all over the
Sure.
internet, and social media, and everywhere. Heavy versus light. To lighten up the mood on this whole conversation, I'm the guy in the middle eating popcorn, watching the arguments go over the top of my head because
Right.
I think that okay, if you want to shoot a heavy arrow, great. If you want to shoot a light arrow for velocity, great. But why not have both? Why not try to be in the middle of it? And so if we're talking to a new archer, like maybe the simplest way to do it is to go, look, we have debates on heavy and light. You've probably heard them, but how about stay in the middle and start there, because you get a little bit of both. So the pros of a heavy arrow obviously is penetration, less wind drift. The cons would be you're going to have to be super accurate with your yardage, whether you range it or you're just really good at estimating yardage. You'd have to practice that a little more. The pros for the lighter arrow, obviously the velocity counteracts that. So you can have some cow elk come out on a trail at 30 yards and the bull come out at 35, and you thought the bull was going to be on the same trail, so you shoot him for 30 and he's 35. Velocity might save your bacon there. And so
Right.
so velocity is good there. Also, velocity in real world terms is really good for clearing stuff in the woods. In other words, if you have an elk at 40 yards and an overhanging branch at 20, the faster and flatter the trajectory, the better chance you go under the branch and harvest the elk. And so in thick forestry and stuff like that, the better the trajectory, the better.
Right.
And so what do you give up, right? I mean, because you're never going to be able to predict which one of those circumstances you're going to encounter. And
Sure.
so how in the world would you ever outguess that, right? And so that's why when you talk, for me, when you talk about pros and cons, it's like, well, I mean, how are you going to choose? How are you going to make that choice? Because you're not going to know if the next 5 years you're going to hit branches with your heavy arrow and never make it to the elk and be mad about that,
Right.
or you don't know if you feel like your arrow's too light and it's costing you penetration and you wound a couple elk or whatever. So I think that those circumstances are never outguessable. That's what I think. And
Sure.
so when you
Yeah.
talk about pros and cons on the arrow weight stuff, it's like, well, where do you even begin? And so that's why I always land with everything in moderation, honestly.
Yeah. So your recommendation is it for like a new guy is to just start somewhere in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got you,
Hmm.
dude. Which
Yeah.
which sounds super rational, Jeremy, but I think it's actually like fairly rare advice because I almost feel like the internet, it kind of has divided archers, right? Like you
Oh,
got
absolutely.
you,
Absolutely.
you're either in like this heavy arrow camp or you're in like you're in the light flat trajectory camp. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, Cliff. And here's the thing too, is like you have some really high end, like super high end influencers in social media, and some of them, recommend the light arrow and the velocity for those pros, those reasons.
Sure.
And then some of them recommend the heavy arrows for the pros and the reasons for the heavy arrow. And so I'll have a customer come in that really likes both of those influencers. And so how are they going to pick and choose what camp they're going to be in because they love them both? It's like, well, this guy's telling me to shoot light and this I really love him, and
Yeah.
this guy's telling me to shoot heavy and I really love him. It's like, what do I do? You know what I mean? And so I think that those arguments and debates can really create confusion for a new archer, no doubt about it. And I've seen it with questioning in my shop when people come in and they ask me that, and they're like, what should I do because so and so says this and so says that,
Right. Right.
and that's what I always recommend. How about just stay in the middle to begin with and see how that works for you?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I just honestly think that's the best place to be.
Yeah, and one anecdote, Jeremy, and it's about an individual that we talked about before the podcast that we both know, and I would call him like a pretty darn successful archer. I know lately he's been doing a bunch of traditional stuff, but I actually asked him. I said, "Hey, man, what weight are your arrows?" And he looked at me
He didn't
like
know.
didn't know. You know what I mean? And he's not the
Yeah,
only one. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not analyzed it at some point in his life, but it's not it's minutia compared to the rest of his hunting. You know what I mean? He just has a setup that he knows
absolutely.
works. He's got the trajectory in his mind. Like he's not worried about constantly playing with this idea. Which is kind of refreshing because if you go on YouTube, every archery channel like this is all they talk about. you know?
It's not only is it really refreshing, but what that illustrates with this guy is the
Sure,
confidence that he has in his hunting ability and his shooting ability, and maybe even his follow up tracking skills and all the things that are important. That just like there's a confidence and an aura coming off of that. And I
sure,
and I always feel like, and I talk about in my shop, that that's how everybody should be. And now, and going back to your thought on him not known as arrow weight, that's most of the data sets that I've collected. There's a lot of guys that have come in. I sold them their arrows. I set their bows up. They were successful, and I'm like, and so when they come back in, it's like, what is your arrow weigh? Well, I don't know. You sold them to me.
right,
Okay, well, so we go on the computer and we figure it out. I'm like, well, this is what it is, and they're like, okay, whatever. I mean, it shot all the way through the elk. It never
sure,
checked up. I picked it up on the other side, and
right,
so I mean, there's something. I feel like there's something special about an individual that takes charge in their own life, and it actually displays leadership quality and not follower quality. Those are the type of people I'm attracted to because they can make anything work. Like literally, like my brother Larry Duggar. I'm so proud of him. He used to work in my shop with me. Obviously, we kind of started the journey together,
sure,
and he kind of burnt out in the atmosphere, and he went a separate way. But like he spent a couple of 2 or 3 years shooting different broadheads on purpose just to prove to the whole world, God and everybody and all our customers that it doesn't matter if you use the stuff right. Okay, and he was
right,
highly successful. I mean, the guy hasn't wounded an animal in like 25 years. Cliff, I'm going to brag about him on this podcast
sure,
right now. He is an absolute killer, and he's just like whatever. Like he doesn't know his FOC. He probably at this point now knows his arrow weight because it's been driven into everybody to know that. So he could probably tell you that, but like other than that, he's just like tune it well, put it in the right spot with a razor sharp front on the end of it, and follow the blood trail to your animal. I mean, it's just that simple for him. And so
sure,
he's a leader. He's a leader in that aspect. So the guy we were talking about a second ago, me and you both know he's also a leader. Like he's the
sure,
captain. He's the captain of his own ship. Like
sure.
he's like, I'm confident. I know it's going to work. Right. So just that's great stuff. Really, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I'd love to hear your thought on this, Jeremy. But I think a lot of people will hear what we just said there, and they'll say, okay, well, that individual who is a good hunter has all these other skill sets, but doesn't dwell on his arrow weight. What if he did dwell on it and he perfected that gear and he was constantly tweaking with that? Wouldn't that just make him better? You know what I mean? And my personal thought is that the problem is a lot of times the two are inversely correlated because people who screw with their crap all the time, they tend to be people who aren't out there working on the other stuff. You know what I mean? I should say they tend to be
Absolutely.
people, but it's how they allocate their time.
Yeah, I've watched like so in my 34 years, I've seen many, many people unfortunately, a very high number. This is how I say it. They've analyzed their self right out of archery
Sure.
because they have such an analytical personality that perfect is not good enough. If I could just make it perfect, right?
Yeah.
And that's not even a thing, right? But I mean, perfect is perfect. But they're constantly, hey, I got to paper tune all 12 of my arrows, and I got to perfect all of my broadheads, and pretty soon it becomes this trap where it's not fun. Like
Sure.
it's just your mind can't let go of any of that stuff, right? And so, back to the guy we're talking about. If he was to do all that, would it make him any more lethal? That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And one of the favorite things my brother used to say to people when they would come in the shop, they would come in, they'd say, hey, I got an elk. Cool. Um, what did everything go good? Not really. What happened? Well, I didn't get it passed through. Okay. Well, you got the elk, right? You said you got the elk. Yeah, the elk went. I watched the elk fall over there on the ground, right, 40 yards away. And he would look at him, Cliff, and he'd go, there's only one level of dead.
Yeah.
If the arrow went all the way through, the elk wasn't deader. It doesn't make it deader,
Right.
right? And
Sure.
so,
Yeah.
I said that, right? But we all know, hey, maybe 2 holes is better than one for blood trail and all that. But that
Sure.
stuff only matters. That stuff only matters if it wasn't a great hit, right? That
Right.
stuff's going to matter whenever you didn't perform or something happened that at that point you needed 2 holes. If you do your job perfectly and everything goes well, you don't need 2 holes. And that was kind of his point, right? You can analyze it and beat it up and stuff, but there's only one level of dead. And if this guy we're talking about kills every animal he shoots at, he could chase stuff and chase his tail around, but if it's still just going to end up with a dead animal, what's the difference?
Right.
You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Yeah.
No, totally, totally, man. Like, and this goes across not just archery. Like rifle stuff's the same way. Just the analysis paralysis thing is it's a
It
real
is real.
deal. And, it's interesting, Jeremy. And I'm like, it's not like I wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory, but I think it's just like a symptom of, a lot of the commercialization that's gone on in hunting, and I'm sure you see it in the archery shop. I think that a symptom of that, and I've really noticed it, man, since I got out of the like outfitting being my primary gig. I've noticed it because it's become my whole world. Like it's just a swirl of gear, and a lot of times, like, you know, I hate to even say this, but I've got a new Hoyt in my closet, and I dread setting it up because I like my old one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I like my old one,
Yeah.
and for me personally, like when I get my new setup and I got the new gear on there, I have to go through a process of like, okay, I've actually, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like I'm probably making some technological improvements, but I have to take a couple steps back, from a skill set perspective, because now I need to get used to this new thing. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure you deal with that too. I guess a question I would have for you as an archery owner, is a guy, now with bow technology, can a guy shoot the same bow for 4 or 5 years, and like, and is he going to see really, like, is the technology of bows moving fast where he really needs to get a new one? Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah. Yes, and no.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, the technology is moving and it's awesome technology. Yes. Does he need it? No.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, so
yeah.
you can't deny the coolness of the technology. Smoother, faster, lighter, integrated. There's definitely feature benefit for
Sure.
sure, no doubt about it. But I would be a black liar if I said you can't go out and kill a deer or an elk this year if you don't buy a new bow. Obviously, right? Yeah,
Right.
I have guys that are coming in that haven't bought a new bow in 10 or 12 years, and the feature benefits now they would drastically notice those, but it wouldn't make the animal any deader when they put the arrow in the animal's lungs.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, right?
Yep.
So it would be lighter to pack around in the woods, and a lot of people, when it comes to lightness, they pick the bows up in the shop like a carbon bow versus an aluminum bow. Oh, I can't tell the difference. Well, no, right? Not in 20 seconds you can't.
Yeah.
But multiply that by chasing an elk up the hill for 7 miles.
Yeah,
You're going to
yeah.
know after 9 days of doing that, you're going to be like, I wish my bow was lighter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Sure.
there's feature benefits outside of performance and shot performance that are good too for new bows, right?
Right.
Like the lightness and stuff, and then just the free velocity. If a guy's shooting a 12-year-old bow, he's going to gain 20 or 25 foot a second of trajectory. And even if he wants to shoot a heavier arrow, he's still getting that 25. Same arrow he was shooting 11 years
Right.
ago is going to go 25 foot a second faster now. So he clears under the branch, kills the elk, and oh, cool. So I'm glad I had that velocity right. So there's feature benefits now. Any good hunter can work around those feature benefits and shoot his old bow. I mean, I
Right.
can't argue or debate that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that
yeah.
answer the question?
No, yeah, yeah, totally, man. And that's kind of I've had this question from hunters, and a lot of times it comes around with like to a budget thing or whatever. And I have always, my opinion had always been like, if you're a new elk hunter and you like, you're gonna be into archery elk hunting, just get this year's bow or last year's bow. At least start with all the new stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's
Absolutely.
I mean, you might as
Uh-huh.
well because it is like you say, it's you don't get a whole lot of free lunches, but a faster bow, outside of like maybe there's some other thing, the ergonomics of that specific bow or whatever. But outside of all of that, it is kind of a free lunch. Just it's
Yeah.
the technology, right? So no,
Yeah.
we're on the same boat, man. Let's jump into the next controversial one, and that's broadhead choice, man. Mechanical versus fixed. Dude, I feel like this can ruin friendships in the elk hunting
No
world.
doubt about it. Oh, no doubt. Yeah, no
So
doubt.
let's do the quick.
Yeah.
Let's do the quick. Give me the quick
Yeah.
overview on this one, and I know it's the same deal, Jeremy. Like it's kind of a spectrum of the pros and cons. But I mean, what should people think about when they're really looking at this one?
Yeah, such a big question. You know what I mean? What church should I go to, or what political party should I join? It's
Sure,
like it's that's it, broadheads are on the same par with that. So when we have a new customer come in my shop, and a lot of times nowadays they've done some research, so they know the question to ask. Should I shoot a fixed blade or mechanical? The very first thing I personally ask them is, who are you hunting with, and what do they shoot? Because I'm not going to get involved in that mess, right? I'm not going to send a black sheep into a white sheep camp, right?
sure,
I'm not going to send a mechanical guy into a fixed blade camp, and so I can nip that in the bud right away and go look. Like if all your guys shoot fixed blade and they feel firmly about that, I have on my wall 4 or 5 great fixed blade heads that my pro staff guys have vetted. Meaning we get a sample pack if we decide we're going to sell them. We send my pro staff guys. They can dot your eye at 100 yards. We send them out with that broadhead. They shoot the broadhead at 100 yards out of a well-tuned bow, way further than any individual's probably going to shoot it. And then they just check it for flight characteristics. If it's good, they say, yes, sell that. And if it's not, they say, don't sell that. And so that's kind of how we go through that process. So if that guy comes in and he's like, yeah, they told me to shoot fixed, then, I try to lean him towards the fixed. And then at that point, we educate him on the technicalities of it. So how, hey, look, you're buying a new bow. We're going to make sure you're tuned well so that whenever that arrow comes out of the bow, there's no kick in the back end, which would steer your broadhead off course. And we try to keep it simple so they can understand it. And so we got to have that arrow flying straight. So that fixed blade on the front will just follow that straightness right to your animal. And so we sell what we feel is the best flying, that we can get best flying mechanic or fixed blade heads. And then I lean them that way. If a guy comes in and he says, "Hey, my camp, I'll shoot mechanicals," and they say, "Don't touch a fixed blade head," we sell them mechanicals, and we have good offerings for those. And so for me, I try to stay out of it as much as I possibly can until I'm drug into it.
yeah, yeah,
But sometimes you just get drug into it, and it's like, well, what do you shoot? And I'm
yeah,
like, oh boy, here we go. Okay,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm definitely a mechanical guy, but it's like I'm still very, very careful with making that recommendation because it's going to be my fault at the end of it, even though I wasn't even anywhere around when the stuff happened, right? And
Sure,
so, and like we talked about in front of the podcast, it's hard for people to actually tell the truth of what actually happened. There's going to be the truth, and then there's going to be an embellishment of what they wanted to actually have happen, whether it was
right.
wounded or killed or whatever. And then there's kind of a taint on that story usually. It's rare to find a human bow hunter that will tell you straight up, this is what happened, and I screwed up, because usually at the end of it is I screwed up, right? So
Right.
so so that's how I approach it when a new bow hunter comes to me, and we do our very best to make sure if they're shooting a fixed blade head that we go the extra mile with everybody, but we go the extra 2 miles with people shooting fixed blade heads that are new. And talking about bow torque, grip, face contact pressure, shot execution, good trigger control, all those things have to be on point if you're going to choose to shoot this fixed blade head. And hopefully, when that person is in that fixed blade head camp, those individuals also can finish them off, help them along as well as we do. So
Right. Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's kind of this in its own right can be like a controversial subject, but mechanicals are. Is it fair to say that your opinion would be they're more forgiving?
yes,
Yeah, and the thing is,
yes,
and that has like true impactful results or an impact on the average results, and that's like, and we can talk about that a little bit more. I think it's such an interesting topic because a lot of guys just want to be like, doesn't matter because I'm going to perfect my
mhm,
my normal broadhead, so my fixed broadhead. So it's an interesting discussion, man, and like you said, very very controversial. I think your perspective on it, dude, is again very unique but makes a lot of sense. Like, what do your buddies shoot, dude? Because it's almost it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of a corny way to put it, but it's the facts. Like, if you show up somewhere and you're the only guy with a mechanical,
yeah.
you're almost like, the peer pressure is so hard that you're literally gonna walk out and be like, "Oh, I forgot my broadheads. I need to go buy some new ones." Because guys are,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, like it's a real thing. You know what I mean?
It
Like,
is.
I hate to admit this, I've said it in other places, but for years, Jeremy, I liked shooting a whisker biscuit. And
Mhm.
I still like shooting a whisker biscuit, but the only reason I don't is because nobody else does.
Yeah,
So it's like a peer pressure,
yeah, yeah. That's funny.
you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a
Hey,
powerful thing.
you're going to learn real quick about me. I'm an individual that I don't care what anybody uses. Period. End of story. As
Sure.
long as they use it right, right. So if
Yeah,
a
yeah.
guy goes out there with a whisker biscuit, his bow is tuned to a whisker biscuit. And he's going to experience a little velocity loss. It's going to be a
Sure.
little bit louder. He's going to have to waterproof it. You don't want to shoot one of those wet. There's some things there, right? But if
Sure.
you take care of that, like if you're a leader, if you're the captain of your own ship and you take care of all those problems, you're not going to have a problem with a whisker biscuit,
Yeah.
because it comes down to the human element of controlling those pros or cons, right? And the other thing, back to the broadheads, I know that there's probably fixed blade guys out there right now that would want to get right on and debate the accuracy of a fixed blade head. Oh no, I can get mine to shoot like any mechanical guy you've ever seen, right? Maybe that's true. And I think that the very best archers in the world, the very best archers in the world, their form, their shot execution, their shot process, all that stuff, they can shoot a fixed blade head extremely well. And they can debate that. And I would be on their side. Here's where they're going to lose me in the debate. Everybody's not you, dude.
Sure.
And most people ain't even close to you. And so you're talking about a small set of guys that can make that happen. And I have no argument they do. But you got to understand, when you look down from that castle you're in, because you're so good at it, you're looking down here at like the peasants, like they don't have the time to put into it that you do. They don't, some of them frankly don't have the want to put in it that you do, right? And they just want, their lives are busy, they're chasing kids, they're doing everything. And I don't hold that against anybody, Cliff, nobody.
Sure.
Those people are not they're not going to shoot a fixed blade head like you do. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't want to make the guys that are really good at it mad, because they're like, oh, that guy don't know what he's talking about. They shoot just like a mechanical. Maybe for you they do, but for the
Yeah.
mass populace of people, no, I don't think they do. Does
Yeah.
that make
And
sense,
oh
Cliff?
yeah, no, it totally makes
Yeah,
sense. And man,
yeah,
you see that in every niche of hunting. Not just archery. You see that everybody wants to project their perfection in a certain segment, that everybody should make their choices based on doing that same thing. Um, and I'm totally been guilty of it on all sorts of gear and that sort of stuff too, because it's almost like if you're in that position where that's your life, it's hard for you to justify that somebody else could have a different approach to it, right? And then I mean, it's unfortunately it'll always dive down into like ethics and moral and all this stuff that's kind of like outside of that decision making process, which I think is kind of a unfair route to go, because like I mean I've had this discussion, I'm sure you have too, Jeremy. A guy will say like, well, if you tune it perfectly, you get your form all the things you just described, I think that a fixed blade has these advantages, and you're basically morally obligated to get to the same place as I am. And it's like, well, okay. But a lot of guys aren't, so
That's correct. Yeah.
it is what it is. And I think I would love to hear your perspective, and then we'll dive into the data set. I think it'll solidify a lot of this stuff we're talking about. Draw weight is kind of an analogous thing. What's your perspective on it, man? Like, and because we're going to get into the data, Jeremy, feel free to reflect on what you've seen data wise too.
Okay. Yeah. So speaking of draw weight, I, in general terms, someone should shoot a draw weight that they can shoot accurately. And so to be able to shoot that accurately, you're going to have to be able to draw the bow accurately and set your skeletal structure or your form to where the bow doesn't move when you're aiming it. It sits very still. And so the problem with high poundage for some people is they want that high poundage for speed and penetration and all that stuff. But sometimes all of that just makes you miss faster.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
Because you're not accurate with it. And so you want to draw weight where you can shoot it extremely accurate because your form can handle it, your body structure can handle it and hold it still. And then you can aim that shot, shoot that shot. It's more important that arrow goes where it belongs than how fast it gets there or how much energy it has, because it's just misused energy if it doesn't go in the right spot.
Sure.
And so that's, in a nutshell, that's how I feel about draw weight. And the data that I collected, it was alarming and kind of shocking to me. I was surprised that the highest wound rate was with the highest poundage bows. And on some other podcasts, we've talked about, hey, why do we think that is? And I think it's just absolutely simply people are overbowed. And it could be like when your poundage is higher, your holding weight is also higher. And so if you have an elk coming in, you draw back and you're at full draw for a minute and a half or 2 minutes,
right,
and you're holding 18 pounds at full draw instead of 11. It's that shot at the end of it when that elk steps out, it's not going to be nearly a shot it could have been at a lighter poundage and a lighter holding weight. So
right,
I think people have to be careful. And then also, if you have, you're going to know this better than everybody, probably I know, because you've probably killed so many animals and seen so many killed. If that animal's looking at you and you have to draw it really super slow in a controlled manner to get that shot off, if you're overbowed and you're pulling that thing all kinds of crazy ways to try to get that
sure,
thing back, the animal's going to run off. You never even get a shot anyway because of the motion. So
right,
I think the wound rate maybe has something to do with that motion put them on edge, and then the shot wasn't as good because the holding weight was higher and there was movement in the shot. Form wasn't set, all those things. So I think simply for a new archer, get a draw weight that you can draw in a controlled fashion and a slow fashion, set your form so you can aim it well and shoot that draw weight.
yeah. Well, and this is an impossible question, Jeremy, but I'm going to ask you it anyways.
Okay.
A
Yeah.
180-pound guy never shot a bow in his life. He comes into your shop and you're going to set him up a bow. What general poundage is he going to walk out with that bow set to?
Between 60 and 65.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a weird phenomenon. I can have a guy come in just fresh out of the gym, biceps bigger than my thighs. They can't pull 60 pounds.
sure.
Just as a weird motion.
Yeah,
Just kind of an uncomfortableness or a hesitation to it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So that is a hard question to answer, because then you have a guy that's as skinny as a rail comes back, pulls 80 pounds like it's,
no
like I pull
problem.
50, like I pull 50. But if I had to, honestly, Cliff, if I had to throw an average on it, 65, that's where I would put it.
Yeah,
And then you have some tougher guys that have been, that can pull 70 right off the bat. And then I look at some guys, hey, this has happened to me too. Like all of my bows on my rack are 60 to 70. And so I go through an hour tuning and setting up a bow and made the mistake, and I still make the dumb mistake still to this day. And then I hand it to them, they can't pull it. Like I have it at 60 pounds, right? It's like, well, shoot, we're going to have to order you a 50 to 60. right?
Sure.
Because I misjudged what I thought maybe they could pull. So,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
so there's that too, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll throw this out there. You may disagree, Jeremy, but I've guided lots of young people or women who have killed elk with 50-pound bows. Like
Yep,
it's not like it's not like it's all of a sudden you can't kill anything with them. You know what I mean? And I think
that's
that
correct.
I mean, I can relate to what you're saying because I think I'm a victim to it a lot of the time, Jeremy. Like I hate to say this because it's probably not the best example, but I don't shoot because particularly because of my lifestyle now. Like I'm not in the U.S. part of the year. I don't shoot my bow year round. So when I come back, after not shooting a bow for 6 months, I'm still shooting the same 70 pounds, 72 pounds, or whatever my bow's at that I was shooting last archery season. I really probably should like tone it back, get my shit together, and then move back up. You know what I mean? But it's hard
Yeah,
for me to do that. Like in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want, and
yeah,
it's kind of a new phenomenon too. At least I personally think, and maybe you've seen this in your shop. It's come off of certain guys, Rogan, Cam. They're shooting really heavy bows,
right.
and so a lot of guys want to do that right off the bat, and I think it's hard. You know,
Hmm. Hmm. You
so
know, my advice is like if a guy comes in my shop and we set up an 80-pound bow and he just right back just like Cameron Haynes does it, I got no problem with that at all.
sure, yeah, yeah,
Like shoot as much as you can control comfortably. And so when somebody asks me how much should I shoot, shoot as much as you can shoot, but make sure you don't overdo it. Make sure you're comfortable when you do it, and
right,
that's really the key. That's the big thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
we have
I'm sorry, go ahead,
sorry, go.
go,
We have a this will hurt a lot of feelings, but in New Mexico for a long time, I don't know if you knew this, but there for a long time they had this weird thing on minimum poundage, like it had to cast an arrow on flat ground 167 yards. Like it wasn't 160, it wasn't 100. It was the weirdest thing. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen some
sure,
weird stuff. So anyway, they got rid of that, and they just went to any bow and any arrow. So
right,
that's not better, but so we had. I'll make this quick. We had a lady come in, she a little bitty lady, and we sold her a PSE mini burner. It's $199 kids bow because
okay,
she was so petite she couldn't hold up in the air. She couldn't hold a bow in the air. We had to find something real small for her, right? This is a $199 bow.
sure,
Max poundage 40 pounds. She drew one of the best. Well, what the sergeants is, right? Over by
sure,
Chalmers. She drew the sergeants 2 years in a row.
okay,
She killed. So she was new, so we put her through a set of archery lessons, taught her how to shoot. Part of the lessons was elk anatomy, and hey, look, you got to keep it 20 yards and under. She was shooting 36 pounds. She killed 2 6-point pulls back to back 2 years in a row with a $199 kids bow at 36 pounds. The first year she left our shop with fixed blade heads, obviously. She came back in, we collected her data. So you use this head? No, my husband made me use these other ones. She shot that bull with a Rage mechanical broadhead with
oh,
36 pounds at 20 yards and watched the elk fall over dead. And then the next year she did it again. She did it 2 years in a row. So I mean, so why in the world could this lady get that done, and then a full grown adult 6'4" male come in and blame me for the broadhead choice I made him pick, right, out
sure,
of an 80-pound bow. And
right.
so it's a perfect illustration of how you use the stuff, how you use the stuff, the decision making in the woods.
Right, for sure,
I just had
man.
to throw that in. Yeah, because when you said, yeah, I might disagree with you at 50 pounds, I do not disagree with that.
Yeah, I
I,
got you.
I would disagree with a guy having his wife at 50 pounds shoot an 80-yard shot at a walking elk.
Sure.
I'd disagree with that, right? But not at 20 yards, 30 yards at a standing broadside elk. I wouldn't. Not at all.
Right. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, man, is like if you are I mean, obviously if you go that route, like you're making some compromises, but you just have to understand what that means. And I hate to say it, and it's archery and firearms. Today I feel like it's worse than ever that people really don't know what a hard shot is. Like I'll take individuals on their very first rifle hunt, Jeremy, and they'll have a 480 yard shot at a bull elk, and they want to shoot it. They don't, and we could just get we could get 100 yards, we get 150 yards closer in 10 minutes. But
No problem.
they think that's a short shot. And the same thing, like, okay, we've stocked up here on this mule deer, and he's 55 yards with archery equipment, and it's like, oh, I can shoot him from here, and it's like, this is like the first time you've shot at a deer, man. That's far, you know. I find it's interesting. I think it's a symptom of all the information out there, and I don't think any of it's like malfeasance or anything like that. It's just what you see. It's made those shots that are pretty. They take a certain skill set. It's made them feel like average to people.
I agree with that 100%. I could not say that any better than you just said that, for sure.
Yeah, I assume you probably see it in your shop, like guys on
Hmm.
their first bow. They're like, oh yeah, I'll be in a month here. I'll be ready to shoot 75 yards at a bow. Oh no.
No, nope. I mean, I have that discussion every time I sell a sight for a new bow, because the decision is simply, do you want a fixed pin sight, which is 20, 30, 40, 50, or out to
Sure.
60, or do you want one that dials so you shoot past 60? And they're like, oh yeah, my buddies all have that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like, well, okay. I mean, that makes me more money, but it's like, you really should really focus on 20 and 30 first. You shouldn't move back another 10 yards until you've mastered that distance.
Sure.
When I give lessons, I tell my people, like, I get them started at 10 yards, the new people, do not, no matter what sort of peer pressure that hits you, do not shoot past 10 yards. They come
Right.
back the next week. I need more arrows. What happened to your arrows? I went over to my buddy's barbecue, and we were shooting at 90 yards. It's like,
Yeah,
what happened? you
yeah.
know, and I think I call that the American way. Like the
Sure.
American, like, hey, being good in 6 months is not good enough. You have to be as good as your buddies yesterday, and
Right.
and we got to get there as fast as we possibly can. And I have people come in all the time that, it's like, I shot a 1 inch group at 60 yards. I can do that pretty regular. Is that good? And I'm like, you should go on tour. Like, you should be on the United States archery team. What
You're
do you
right.
mean? Well, I mean, they're shooting an 80 centimeter. They're shooting a bullseye about this big, and they miss it sometimes at 50 meters. Really? I'm like, yeah. Like, we need to get you a target bow. And they're like, well, they're like, okay, well, maybe I just did that one time. Like, I didn't get the other right. You know what I'm saying?
Oh
Like, so
yeah, of
they,
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so what happens is, it happens one time, and that turns into, when you next time you talk to anybody that means anything, right? It turns in from one time lucky to I do it all the time. And it's
Yeah, yeah.
almost like this. It's almost like they start to believe their own lie, and then
Yeah.
it's like, we got to move back. We got to move back, right? I'm with my buddies now, and really, they never paid the dues to really go through the proper process to really actually do it. And so
Yeah.
that's a thing. That's a real thing for sure.
All right, guys, so I wanted to mention that I'm having these custom skinning knives made. These are called Cliff Skinner. I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I've had this knife made the way that it's made. Got a short video on the website. The details are there. Pursuitwithcliff.com. Click in the corner up by shop. You'll see Cliff Skinner. Click that puppy. You'll get all the details. Yeah, and to me, man, you hit on an important deal there. It's the variability. I shoot traditional sometimes, and I actually had a question in my group that for you about traditional stuff, and we can talk about it. But um,
Love it.
it's not that I'm not accurate at 25 yards or so or whatever, and that's kind of where I keep it, 25 30 yards max. But it's not that I can go out in my backyard and I can shoot a bunch of groups that are like they're gonna kill elk, but I can come out another day and start missing the target, and it's like and it's very easy to, in my mind, only remember the good days. You know what I mean? That I went out there and shot a pretty good group, and that all those arrows would kill elk, and the next day only half the arrows would kill elk. It's like, well, the variability is a gigantic issue. You know what I mean?
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some sports psychologists out there that are like, always just remember the good things, because your brain just wants that input. It doesn't
Sure.
want the negative. And then there's other sports people that go, no, you have to write down the bad stuff that happened, and you got to focus on how to fix that. And I
Yeah.
think what you just said, what happens is it leans towards the other psychology part of it, where it's like, no, I just got to think about the good, think about the good. And
Sure.
pretty soon there's this falseness that's going on about how good I really am.
Right.
Versus, okay, yeah, I really can't, day in, day out, I can't shoot the same style of group or the same size of group. So what do I need to do? What's the problem? Let's fix the problem so that day in, day out, I shoot the group that's capable of killing that elk at 30 yards or whatever it is, you know?
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
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 Well, and we're we have it's kind of a unique activity where part of the skill set is knowing how capable we are. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
we actually have to have a pretty good idea of where that given the circumstances, where can we proficiently kill an animal? And it's interesting, Jeremy, because I think people again will hear that and they'll be like, well, yeah, but guys are gonna, guys are on that one, once a year elk hunting trip. If you get into the nitty gritty, they're always gonna push it because it's like, well,
Mhm.
if I don't shoot at this bull that's 50 yards, maybe I only feel accurate at 40, but I'm going to shoot at him at 50 because it's like my only chance. Like, let's be honest,
Mhm.
like that decision
Mhm.
making process goes through people's head. But I saw this as a guide a ton. I think people view it as this binary outcome. And it's like, no, no, no. If you know for sure you're not going to shoot past X, a lot of the times the situation gets better. And
Mhm.
if you shoot, you've fucked up the chances of the situation getting better. You know what I mean? And so,
We've hey, we've all been there.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah, we've all been. When I was a young guy, I was the worst. Like we've all been
sure,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. Finish your thought.
No, no, no. That was
That
it,
was
man.
it. That was it.
It yeah,
Yeah. So it's here's the funny thing about that. Like I think that now that you've talked to me a while, you're probably understanding that I'm a very simple guy. Like
sure,
like I try to operate on a high level of common sense. And so if your maximum effective range day in day out with the compound bow is 50 yards, how big the animal is, how long it's taking you to draw a tag, or whether it's the last day or first day, doesn't change your maximum effective range.
right,
You know what I
sure.
mean? But what happens is it does. Like mentally, it's like
Oh
I
yeah,
gotta like it's the last day. I gotta take that shot. It's taken me 5 years to draw the tag. I got to take that shot. When you know dang good and well, it's outside of your maximum effective range, and so it's like I don't know how we do it, but we got to get people to stay in bounds on a hunt
yeah,
to their maximum effective range. And maybe I'm asking for a utopia that will never exist. Probably so. Like that's
yeah,
probably never going to happen because when you're by yourself and nobody's around, like what's the definition of character? Like, ain't
sure,
nobody watching around. Here we go, baby. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have to tell anybody you did that, right? So,
right,
so part of the sample set, like we have like a 0% wound rate at like 90 plus, and that's because nobody comes and brags about wounding an animal far. They only come and brag about
right.
killing an animal far, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that sample
sure.
set goes out the window because nobody's going to tell you that they went outside their maximum effective range and went for it because they just had to, you know. So
Yeah,
I
yep,
don't know how
yep.
you rein that back in. There's probably no way to really do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a hard. I think it's a hard one for people to fathom. I think for me, how I think about it, Jeremy, is like, okay, one, am I doing something ethical? Which, of course, that's like where this gray area is, right? And we're pushing it, but also by releasing this arrow in a subpar situation, am I giving up? I mean, even if I only got 30 minutes left in the hunt, during that 30 minutes is that bull gonna walk off and then show back up 20 yards from me? You know what I
Yep.
mean? That's how I try to think about it, is like, I think that's from guidance, seeing it happen so many times. Like, a guy's not ready, or I mean, I've had guys archery and rifle where after the shot I asked them, I'm like, well, what do you think? Or, what was your feelings on it? And they look at me and they go, oh, I just wish I didn't shoot. And it's like, what? I'm like,
Right.
why? And in my mind, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I surely wish you didn't shoot, because now all the opportunities is gone,
Gone.
on that elk,
Yeah.
deer, or whatever. So that's how I try to view it. But yeah, you're right, dude. In the end, like, it's a very challenging thing. Um,
You know what though, Cliff? I love that perspective. Like if we're going to teach, like if we're going to try to get people to stop doing it, I can't think of a better way than teaching your perspective on that. That is absolutely spot on perfect. It's like, look, stop, slow down. don't take a poor opportunity when it's likely that you're fixing to get a better one. And maybe
Right.
that's the answer to teaching, the teaching aspect of it, you know.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
know for sure, man. Let's dive into the data, dude. Give
Okay.
us the give I'll I know you've gone through it a bunch of times, Jeremy, so I'm gonna let you run through it, man, and give us your conclusions and thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. I've got it wrote down. Let me look at my list here.
Yeah,
So, and we can go through it fairly quick. I think we've talked a lot of the talking points about
sure.
why we think is what we've covered. Out of 511 samples over 6 years, blue collar, hardworking American bow hunters coming in my shop. 45% of that sample was fixed blade shots, and 55% was mechanical. And so in our area, there's 10% more mechanical shooters. The wound rate is where I was shocked because what I was hoping to get out of this data was everything to be exactly equal. Like, right, that way I can go, look, it doesn't matter what you shoot,
Oh, sure.
your decision making process and how you behave with your equipment and all the things that you need to be doing is what matters. Well, that didn't happen. Fixed blade wound rate was 23%, and mechanical wound rate was 12.3%. And so mechanical wound rate was almost half less than the fixed blade wound rate.
Yeah.
Do you want me to just keep going and lay it all
Yeah,
out there? Or do you want to talk
yeah.
about it?
No, we can talk about it a little bit. I've listened to you several times before, Jeremy, yeah, because I had some questions on this, and it's always like a sensitive topic. But do you think your overall, not the difference between the two, but do you think your overall wound rate is underestimated?
Yes.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
the only reason I bring it up, Jeremy, is because I get a lot of new guys that they're flabbergasted when they hear 10%. You know what I mean? Um, and I think it's probably closer to 30%. And I think it's for me. I'm just projecting my thoughts on it. I think it's important for newer archers to know that because they need to know that like you need to be ready to spend some time finding elk if you're gonna bow hunt. You know what I mean? So my
Yep.
thoughts on it.
I agree with that. The data that I collected, so the story starts, and immediately I know whether it was a wounded elk or deer or antelope, whatever it was, or whether it was recovered. And so the
Sure.
second that happens, I'm all in with the data. And so I don't know that my personal data is low on the wound rate. I don't know that that's the case because every story that comes in, if it's a wound, I immediately gather that data. So
Right.
in other words, I haven't skipped over someone telling me a story they wounded one and then not collected the data.
I got you.
And
Yep.
so, but however, I think that out there as a whole, and whether it's on um, a hunting TV show or whatever it might be, your buddies, friends, whatever. I think that the reporting of wounded animals is lower than what actually happens. Does that
Hmm.
make sense? Yeah.
Sure.
On the data set, I think it's accurate because I gather all of it. But out in the real world, I think it's the wound rate may be higher than we actually think.
Yeah, yeah, and that's for rifle too. That would stand true to any weapon, I believe.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
but on the mechanicals versus broadheads, I know we touched on it a little bit, but what do you think? What's your kind of takeaway, and why do you think there's such a gap?
I'll make really fast. I'll make it quick. I think that a lot of the people that shoot mechanicals are the captains of their own ship. They've come to a place in archery where they're really good at it. They're more seasoned. They're more experienced. They prioritize accuracy overall, and they shoot mechanical heads. And then a lot of the fixed blade head sales that we make in the shop, they have been influenced to not shoot a mechanical head. And so I think that there's because they're new and maybe there's a lack of preparedness because they've run out of time, which I don't hold it against anybody. That happens. It's life.
Sure.
But I think because they're influenced and they make that decision and maybe their bow's not tuned, they're not good at shooting to begin with. They're pushing that maximum effective range, all that stuff. I think that is why. And I think it's simply that. Obviously, if we took the best fixed blade shooter in the world and we took the best mechanical blade shooter in the world, I think that the wound rates would be drastically lower and very equal. Does
Right.
that make sense? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I think that's why. Yeah.
yeah. Which makes which kind of calms down the whole argument Yeah, like the your data is not saying that everybody who shoots a fixed blade is making the wrong choice. It's just
No, not at all.
it's saying that this is coming out for a reason. This is going to be
Yep.
a weird follow on question, Jeremy, and I've asked a lot of guys that have like dove into this on the fixed stuff, on the fixed blade stuff. Have you ever had a hunter tell you that he shot like quartering two in the shoulder with a fixed blade and killed the bull?
All the time.
Yeah, can you like literally blows through the knuckle of the shoulder and catches both lungs? Is that the scenario?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because if it's quarter and T that severe, you're not going to catch both lungs. Anatomy says that,
you're gonna
like
miss
the
one.
angle of
You're
the,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, you're going to miss one. And so we dove into this a little bit on another podcast. I think the simple understanding of anatomy, what the knowledge level that people have of that needs to be raised,
sure,
because I think that there's people don't understand the shoulder. What the shoulder is, that they call the meaty muscle of the shoulder, where there's scapula in it, the shoulder. And so what they don't realize is, going way forward towards the neck and angling, then attaching to the actual shoulder socket where the scapula does that, and then coming back into the bone that comes off of that, angling back down towards the leg. If it's a broadside or a quartering away animal, if you hit that, that was a horrible shot. And if you choose to shoot the quartering two you shot and you hit that, I don't buy that they're going through that actual ball, the actual
right.
ball, and then both lungs. And so I think there's embellishment there.
Yeah,
Does that
like
answer the question?
yeah, no, that answers the question, and that's kind of what I. Well, there's a lot there, dude, because
Yeah.
I'll admit, Jeremy, like in shot placement's a really interesting thing, and it sounds like, and maybe it is part of your data, or at least you've probably picked up some thoughts on it. So I'd love to hear your perspective on it. But man, I cannot tell you how many bulls I've watched a client shoot where, and I've seen a lot of them, man. But still, my quick takeaway was that bull's dead. Both lungs, he's dead. You know what I mean? And then in some of these situations, one of two things happens. I quickly realized that, okay, I haven't found the bull in 100 yards, which means you're 100, 150 yards, which means that arrow probably didn't go through both lungs. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And then a lot of times, modern day, I get a lot of this stuff on iPhone footage, so I can go look at it, and it's like, oh, it still looks good. And then I look down at where the bull's feet are, and I'm like, all right, now it doesn't look also all that good. But I mean, it's like minuscule, changes in the angle are gigantic, man. And
Giant.
yeah, and it's like you almost have to visualize their lungs as you shoot. And so I think what you're saying is like if you take that quartering to that way, you're gonna, if you hit the far side lung, you're not gonna hit the close side lung, right?
Most likely.
But if you aim too far back, you're gonna miss the far side lung. That's why it's like you got like a sliver, man. And so it's like, and then if you same deal with like hitting this knuckle on the shoulder. I think a lot of guys who hit that and go through, really what they do is they hit it, and it's like a bullet hitting a helmet or something. The arrow actually sloughs around it and then ends up going into, getting its way through the diaphragm or whatever. But it's
Yep. I
it's
agree.
it's interesting stuff. Do you have an opinion on like in a general sense, bulls that aren't recovered, are they shot too far back or too far forward? Do you have a thought on that?
Both.
Both. Okay. They just
Yeah,
don't hit
both.
it right. Yeah.
They just don't hit it right. Yeah. That's why the argument, the argument's weird about, um, excuse me, it's weird about, and you know this, and everybody knows this. I'm going to say something that everybody already knows. When there's a fixed blade proponent that's maybe even selling fixed blade heads, manufacturer them, right? They always talk about the front side of the animal. When there's a mechanical broadhead proponent, they're always talking about the middle of the animal. Well, hey, ours will cut a bigger hole in the guts and you're more apt to find them. Well, ours will penetrate better and heavy bone in the front. You're more apt to find them. It's like, who cares? It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those debates fall on deaf ears to me because I understand that there's a small percentage of things that happen that's out of our control. I get that. I understand that. The animal wheels, drops, moves, whatever, right?
Sure.
But that's also unpredictable. I mean, I've videotaped shots on animals before with my family members and friends where they turn and move this way, and some of them turn and move this way. Some of them just go straight down. It's like you can't ever predict what's going to happen. So how could you purchase a broadhead based on the fact that, well, if this happens, you need this one? Well, what if it don't
Right.
happen? What if it doesn't happen, right? And so, so yes, when I'm collecting this stuff, I listen to the stories, and I don't have this wrote down. And so
Right.
this is based off my memory and my experience in the shop, constantly hearing hunting stories. But I would call it almost a 50-50. I got shot him, I didn't find him. I shot him up in the front, didn't find him. It's
Yeah.
probably, I bet it's split right down in the middle, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, if I had to put my feet to the fire on it, I'd say like maybe slightly to the arrows going too far back. But I've seen both. I think the biggest thing for me, Jeremy, is I hear it all the time. People are like, elk have big vitals. It's like, yeah, if they're perfectly broadside. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like
I know exactly what you mean.
yeah, and they're like
Uh-huh.
with a gun you can get away with it because you don't necessarily. I mean, you so much damage you can
You're going to bring
blow.
stuff. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean. It's a different thing because in my experience with archery stuff, you can't get away with it, man. Like you basically have to go through both lungs, or you got to have a little luck on your side, you know. Um,
Mm-hmm. I
so
agree.
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
it's interesting stuff. Yeah,
It's the classic thing too, Cliff. The better you are, the luckier you get.
sure,
And so there can be there always may be an element of luck based on that individual shot, what
sure,
happened. But when you control in a very professional manner everything that you could control, from decision making to the end of everything, it's always going to end up better. Like it's
right.
you're just always going to be luckier. I feel like, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
So
yeah, sure.
that's how
No,
I
no,
feel about it.
no. That makes sense. Just to finish up on the head choice, because we didn't touch on this earlier. The challenges with fixed heads that you see people have, it's just based on the fact that you have a surface. Is that correct, Jerry? Is that like the gist of it? Is now you've got a
That's the
surface?
gist of it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You have stuff that's the wind is flowing around or into on the front of your arrow, which can, if the arrow's not tuned, in general terms, offset the fletching in the back. And
Right.
so, if that arrow comes out biased to a direction, that bright is going to steer it wherever the arrow told it to go. And so, so you have those planing surfaces on the front that can affect it, yes,
Yeah.
versus a mechanical that's shut. Yeah.
And one thing, as I've like gone between the two a bunch, I shoot actually Grim Reaper mechanicals
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah.
sometimes, but and then I've also shot quite a few fixed heads. I always wonder, and I totally could test this. I always wonder how much I can be where I get very confident with the fixed head, and everything seems tuned right. I've taken it to folks that have more knowledge than I do. They've watched me shoot it. Everything looks good, grouping good, all that good stuff. And then I shoot from an awkward position, and it's not the tune of the bow, it's me. And like how much is exacerbated, like, weird torque I'm putting on that. Is that exacerbated by the head? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, do you have a thought on that?
Yes, I think it's very possible that would you're tuned perfect in your backyard. You went to the pro shop, you did everything right, and then you got in the heat of the moment and you were in a weird shooting position, which created a little hand torque. You got excited and you yanked at your trigger or whatever it might be, right?
Sure.
As soon as whatever you do biases that arrow, it changes the arrow from coming straight out of the bow to the back end of the arrow going in a direction. The front of that blade on the front is going to steer it in the direction that arrow came out of the bow. So
Right.
if the arrow comes out tail left, the arrow is pointing to the right. It's going to go to the right. So in your backyard, under perfect circumstances, if that bow launched that arrow straight every time because you're standing on flat ground, no wind, everything was good, perfect. That's great. But in a hunting situation, if anything happened to make that bow come out with a bias, it's going to change how it goes. It's going to change
Right.
how it flies. Yeah.
Yeah. No, no,
So that's just physics. I mean,
sure.
that's just how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the first thing I notice if I practice like weird positions is like I'll visibly see that I chucked the tail of the fletchings of an arrow off. I could shoot 1,000 arrows, straight back there at my targets, and my kids are running around. I'm just doing the normal, shoot in the afternoon thing, and I never notice it. And then I get to screwing around, and I'll do something where I can see an arrow, like visually just, and I'm like, oh, that
Hmm.
was not
Hmm.
good. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I
So
do.
yeah,
I do.
I could, I could see
Yeah.
how that would factor into that difference. Let's talk about your data, your next piece, man. Is it arrow weight or what
Okay.
else you got?
So we did. So we got. We have arrow weight, and we have wound rate by bow poundage, and then we have wound rate at different shot distances. So whatever one you want to hear about.
Go for it, dude.
Okay, yeah. So we touched on the poundage a little bit, and so on the poundage, I did three sets, data sets: 0 to 60, 61 to 70, and 71 plus. And so the wound rate on all the samples I collected from 0 to 60 was 15.9%. 61 to 70 pounds, which I would consider like a lot of people, it was 48% of the sample size. It was 14.9%. And then the 71 plus, which was 38% of the sample size, the win rate jumped to 18.8%. So 15.9, 14.9, and then 18.8 at that higher poundage.
Yeah, it probably just based on the topics that we discussed. Just a little
I
too much.
believe
Yep.
I believe overbowed, long holds waiting for an elk to come out, deer to come out, whatever, and then a subpar shot at the end of it. And then just simply not being able to set your form well enough to have a good float on your sight pin when you're aiming. So I think that's really largely the gist of it.
Sure.
There could be to a factor in there of invincibility. Like I'm shooting 80 pounds, I'm invincible. I'm going to shoot at that elk at any distance. I'm
Oh,
going to shoot at
right.
that elk at any angle, right? And it becomes, hey, I got this thing here. I got this system. I've built it on purpose so that I can make those bad decisions in the woods, right? And I think that's part of it as well.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's an interesting one because I've actually felt that a little bit, Jeremy, as I've considered changing my setup because it's like, okay, I'm gonna consider going to like a heavier setup or whatever, right? And then you put all this effort into it, and then at the end of it, in my mind, I'm shooting the setup. My trajectory is completely different, but it just I know I'm shooting like a heavier arrow. So I think to myself like, okay, this translates to me having more flexibility in where I can hit. But
Mm-hmm.
I've just made that assumption. I don't really know if it's true. And I this is like a subject I've really dwelled on with some guys that are big heavy arrow proponents. It's like, well, like, and I know there's not an answer, but is it really like the area that I have to hit? Is it actually bigger now that I'm shooting a heavier arrow, or is it not? You know what I mean? It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
this debate, and I mean, you could give me your
Mm-hmm.
opinion on it. I know it's an impossible question to answer. I don't know.
To me, it's not impossible. The answer is absolutely no. It
Yeah.
doesn't. You can't hit a bigger area because it doesn't expand vitals.
Right.
Vitals are vitals. You have to puncture with an extremely sharp object vitals. And
Right.
so, like on a broadside elk, it doesn't have to go in any. And to get two longs on a broadside elk is going to 8 inches or something. I don't know what it would be, but
Right.
I mean, this weird thought of if I shoot this heavier poundage, heavier arrow, fixed blade head, all of a sudden it expands where I can hit the elk. I think that's crazy.
Right.
I do, man. I think that there's going to be like coincidences. I think there'll be some coincidental here where you're shooting a heavier arrow and the elk, drops and starts to face you when you shoot. And maybe you skin him out and right down towards part of the thicker part of the scapula, there's a little broadhead mark and you killed him, right? Oh, there it
Sure.
is, man. That's the answer. Well, next time if he goes the other direction, you gut shoot him with your small fixed blade head, it's going to be a totally different thing.
Right.
It's not going to, right? Because it's not going to hit anything vital to where you can recover that out quickly. Like you said, if it's not within 100 or 150 yards, you always have to stop and assess, what am I doing here? Because what really happened?
Yeah.
We all know that, right? If you really pound them, they're not going very far. And so my answer to that is absolutely, I won't budge on that. It doesn't expand the kill zone. The kill zone is still the exact same size.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much common sense again, probably.
No, dude, it's yeah, exactly. I mean, the way you describe it is common sense, but it's in my mind, if I really take that fact, take that as fact, it's really hard for me to argue to have a heavier arrow. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of the other stuff is like marginal benefit to me. You know what I mean?
I do.
And
Hmm.
I've had this I've had the discussion with I've actually talked to Dr. Ashby about it a little bit. I'm sure you're
Hmm.
familiar with his
I
stuff.
do. I am. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
For sure.
and he his argument is a little it's interesting. Like when I've discussed it with him, one it's like it's a little bit apples to oranges because for sure a lot of his experiences with is not elk. And I wonder if that factors in, and I'm sure me and you could have a 2 hour podcast on this to describe it, and we're never gonna figure out the answer. But I kind of pressed him on that, like, hey, dude, can all of a sudden I start aiming at a different spot and kill elk? And I think, the gist of that conversation was like, he wasn't 100% sure. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
for the same
That's a
reasons
great.
you know.
How could you have asked a better question, Cliff? I mean,
Yeah.
that is the absolute perfect question.
Yeah.
Can I aim at a different spot and still kill this animal? Well, it
Right.
depends on what spot. Well, it depends on what spot you're aiming at.
Sure.
Well, okay, yeah, of course it does. That's what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And man, it gets convoluted for me personally because I I'm an archer and I'm a rifle guy, and the answer is different between the two types of weapon systems. I think what we're
I
getting
agree.
at, in like what you've said, Jeremy, to me, and this is what I've seen with elk hunting, man, with bows, the outcome is pretty binary. Like, I mean, let's be honest, man. If you don't find them in the first 150 yards with both lungs got holes in them, it's like the chances of recovering them like falls out. You know what I mean?
Going to
Like
be a
it,
long day or a long
yeah,
2 days or
yeah,
whatever. Oh, no,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
I agree.
exactly. So you get a little bit more binary outcome, and I think that's why I personally struggle with it. It's like, well, I can change the type of bullet and different cartridges and calibers, and it actually does expand where I can hit them. You know what I mean? But that maybe doesn't apply to archery. I think your logic's probably
Mhm.
is pretty sound on that. So I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, man. It's
No,
just an interesting.
that was a great question you posed to him, and I think that sums it up beautifully. And then the other thing is one of the data sets we didn't talk about on other podcasts. I had a guy private message me on Instagram and asked a really really good question. He's like, the wound rates on the poundages. He said, "Can you give me average shot distance on those?" And I said, "Yes, I can. That's not a problem." So I didn't write it down, but I can remember roughly what it was. So guys that were shooting 71, and we didn't. This was not just wounds. This was just the shots taken, whether it was a kill or a wound. This was complete data set on 71 plus, 61 to 70 and 0 to 60 pound bows. Right, average shot distance across those sample sets, and it was like 50 yards on the 71 to 80. It dropped down to the low 40s on the 61 to 70, and then on the 0 to 60 it was sub 40. And so it was the guy shooting the 71 and 80 pound bows definitely had a longer average shot distance. And so to answer
Sure.
that guy's questions, I was like, great question, number one. And number two, you're exactly spot on. The people that have selected higher poundage bows have decided to shoot farther. I mean, it's in the data sets,
Sure.
511 samples. So that was really interesting. And it was just a great question that guy asked me. It was really cool.
Guys, I've been using Onyx Maps for almost 2 decades now, hunting, guiding, outfitting. It is the gold standard tool when it comes to mapping software in the hunting world. They've been a huge supporter of my content for multiple years. So if you want to support me and you want to support them, use my code CliffG for 20% off at onyxmaps.com. It is an awesome tool that I use all the time when I'm preparing for hunts, and I use it almost every single day in the field. For navigation, knowing unit boundaries, knowing private land boundaries, it is the tool you have to have. No, it's a great question, and it kind of harkens back to the topic we talked about earlier, Jeremy. Like, if those guys would have just waited, would they
Mhm.
have, would they have
You're
less
spot
wounding?
on.
You know what I
You're
mean?
spot. You can't be more spot on, man. Like,
It's
I've never
like,
talked to anybody that has your perspective, and I love it. Like, that
well,
is the
it's
perfect
like,
answer to all of it.
yeah, yeah. It's like, what do they say, dude? I think they call it like Maslow's hammer, because you see it with long range shooting too, dude. Like if a guy's, and it could be a skill set too. guy's got a killer skill set, like he can do it, but we can get closer. They still want to, he's got the long range equipment. He's got the skill set to shoot long range, like very proficient, ethically can do it. And the question arises like, why don't we just get closer? Because even with your skill set, like we're going to increase the chances, you know?
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
we don't want to
Mhm.
do that because we've have an image of it in our mind. So if I'm shooting 80 pound bow, 85 pound bow, I'm not visualizing, sticking it through an elk at 12 yards because
Right.
I'm visualizing like shoo.
Hey, and hey, Cliff, why is it cooler? Why is there the cool factor higher to say I shot it farther than to say I'm so good at bow hunting I got to 12 yards? Why is the cool
Yeah.
factor? Why does it lean towards the longer shooting?
I don't know, man. I
You
think it's
know?
probably
Yeah,
just like a
culture.
cultural thing. Like I think we're weird that way, man. I think that when we see somebody shoot an elk from up close, we think, well, anybody could have done that, because we're just observing the shot. We're not observing, oh, like that guy was a genius how he set up on that bull, like to get it to come in that close, like all the stuff that you probably think about all the time, Jeremy. Like, okay, I'm gonna set up just perfectly so I can get this. You don't get a bull 10 yards from you or a bull 6 yards from you by being a dumbass. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah,
generally you've like fooled him. You know what I mean? Like you got him. You
absolutely.
basically, unless you got lucky, like you got him to come right where you expected him. Right where you tricked him to come. But I don't think we just observe. I think we don't observe it that way.
Not seeing the yeah, we're not seeing the full video. We're not seeing the full everything that happened leading up
Sure.
to the shot. You're right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
I
get
think
it.
that's the a little bit of the bias there, man. But
Yeah,
yeah, what else? What did we cover all
yeah.
the data?
We got we already talked about arrow weight. Um, I think we talked about that enough.
Yeah,
We can
arrow
repeat
weight,
that.
draw weight, and heads.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think we're good. I have some data on shot distance, but really the takeaways on that were really interesting was our highest wound rate was the sample set 21 to 30, and then our lowest sample rate set was 50 to 60. And we've
okay,
discussed on other podcasts why we think that is, and it draws out the discussion of animals move when the bow's louder and you're closer to them. So sometimes you have animals moving when the arrow hits them. You don't have that at 50 and 60. We talked about people practicing more at those longer distances and becoming proficient with their centering their bottom pin on a 5-pin sight, and various things that kind of are probably the reasons why. And then the other thing too, the sample set at the 2130 was higher as well, so there's more samples there. But some interesting topics there. But I think that I think people would understand all that for sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it's kind of it's a little bit counterintuitive, but then when you explain it, it kind of makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
those different factors would play in. Man, Jeremy, dude, I hate to do this to you, but we're gonna have to do a mule deer one. Let's do a solo podcast on mule deer. Because if I
That'd
if I
be
talk to you if I talk to you about it now, man, it's like not gonna do it justice. I have
awesome. I like it. I like
um
it.
uh I'll ask you one question about mule deer because I want to hear it. What do you think draws you to mule deer, man?
I don't know. I was born that way.
Yeah.
Like, and I have like people don't understand. Like I don't. I've killed 2 elk in my life personally. You'll get a kick out of this. I've never missed an elk with my bow.
Oh,
I've shot at
perfect,
two
dude.
elk and I've killed 2 elk. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And both of them were lethal hits. I shot one of them at 12 yards. It was a cow. I shot her in a water pond and she died quick. And then I shot a really big bull in the Gila, south of New Mexico's 370. And I shot him at 27 yards, slightly cornering away through both lungs. He made it 40 yards. I shot one with the cow with a fixed blade, the bull with the mechanical. And so anyway, like when guys say you need to go to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, because I can't believe you don't like elk hunting. I just don't understand you. I don't get you. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so when you ask me that question, what draws you to mule deer? I, I don't know, but like there. I have a love for mule deer, like everything mule deer, everything about them that God gave me. That's the best way I
Sure.
can answer it. I from a young age, like when I first started hunting when I was 10 years old, killed my first mule deer. Like I was exposed to elk hunting and other things, but man, I just like there was just this fixation that happened to me on them, and the bigger the better, right? So I've shot a bunch of smaller ones, and I went through the same progression of get one, then get a lot, and then get the biggest one. And now I'm kind of on the back end of like I just love chasing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like there's
sure.
that progression in fishing and hunting and everything, right? I'm 54, so I'm an old geezer, but yeah, it's just the places they live, the color of them, their behavior, the difficulty of shooting a age class mature mule deer. Like you can't bugle them in, you can't call them in. Trust me, I've tried to call mule deer all my life. I just
Sure.
there's no way. You just it doesn't happen. Man. If there's somebody listening to this is perfected calling a 7.5-year-old buck, like private message me because like I'm not right at all. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
it's just that man, just the elusiveness. And obviously, we all know that an immature one is not elusive. An immature mule
Right.
deer is not smart. An immature mule deer is easy, right? You can drive your pickup truck down the road, put your gun out the window, and shoot them, whatever you want to do, right?
Sure.
But but when I'm talking about mule deer, I think like of the subspecies of age class big mule deer, and
Right.
that's what I'm in love with more so than the whole. Even though I'm in love with the whole as well, so I
Sure.
don't know. It's just, dude, it's in me. You know, people talk about nature, nurture. Like that wasn't nurtured into me. That was
Yeah.
nature from the get go. Yeah.
Yeah, just yeah, mule deer click for you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always been my favorite hunt to guide for sure, Jeremy, and even personally hunting, it's for sure up there. But my thought on mule deer, one thing I think is really cool about it, it's been the case for the vast majority of my life, and probably a lot of your life, and maybe things are changing a little bit, but I still think the opportunity's there. Is a normal guy can hunt the biggest bucks in the world. You know what I mean? And that's not I'm not saying that it's not harder for him. If he had a million bucks in the bank, it'd be a little easier for him. But in general, like it's still possible. Like I know lots of guys, man, that they're dedicated to mule deer and they're normal guys, blue collar guys, and they've killed 5, 6 giant bucks in their lifetime. And that's like their hunting life's work. And they've had access to that. Like they're hunting stuff that maybe it took a point to draw, maybe it took no points to draw. I think that's something pretty cool about mule deer.
You just described me. That's exactly me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And you're right. Yeah. There's still opportunity to be had, and, of course, I'm like everybody else. I want the opportunity in the best places, but, frankly, that's going away in a lot of places. And so,
sure,
like I just love being out there like in my area in our units, and we talked before the podcast, you're fully aware of these units in the Northwest,
sure.
and I didn't know that before we talked, but now I know you got a pretty good grasp on all this stuff, and so which is really highly impressive to me, by the way.
Ah,
but
cool.
um but yeah, but I just, so for me, I'm to a point now where I don't, we can talk about this on another podcast, you can stop me, but I can make it quick. I'm to a point now where I'm okay waiting for a good tag, and if that's 4 or 5 years, and that seems to be what my luck is, every 4 or 5 years I get a tag. Well, in the meantime, in those 4 years, I'm out there, tracking, glassing, finding,
Sure.
running, coyote hunting, trying to find new areas and stuff. And so, um, um, I'm still doing it. I'm just not pulling the trigger until
Yeah.
it's time, and I got the tag to pull the trigger. So I'm a rare bird. I'm okay waiting for that tag to shoot the specific buck that I've been watching and that I've found.
Oh, sure.
And there's something special to me about that. Like I put in for Utah and Colorado and Arizona. I do all that. I don't expect a whole lot out of it because I put in for the best hunts. But my
Right.
game really is right here in my own backyard, because we have one hell of a backyard, man.
Sure.
It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So yeah,
you're absolutely in a good spot, man. Um,
yeah.
Last question, Jeremy, and then I'll let you go, man. Do you have
Okay.
anything, and it could be archery stuff from your shop that people are enthused by, or it could be just from your personal hunting. Do you have any gear that you feel is underrated or people should, consider?
Um, this
Or
is,
or or
you're
anything
gonna laugh.
or
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
overrated, but anything goes, dude.
yeah.
What do you got?
You're gonna laugh at this. My two most underrated pieces of gear. on my person when I'm hunting is chapstick and hand warmers.
I like it, dude. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we hunt Colorado on a migration trail. We actually sit all day long. We
Sure.
watch hundreds of deer migrate. We found a magical spot. I've found a lot of good hunting spots in my life, but this one is the most magical, and that says a lot, right? And we
Yeah.
just, me and old Muley Slayer, Mark Smith, we sit there under that tree. I always give him first crack because he likes to just shoot stuff most of the time.
Yeah.
Like he wants a big one like everybody else, but he's more apt to get on the trigger than me, and I just sit back and watch. But the hand warmer, like if my lips get dry, I would die. Like if chapstick went out of, like if there's none left, like I would be dead tomorrow. I don't have that. You know what I mean? And then the
You're
hand
you're
warmers,
stockpiling chapstick in the case
yeah,
of the apocalypse or whatever.
yeah, you got it, man. Burt's Bees, that's my fave. And then hand warmers, like because and this, I don't know, this might be a tip, or people might just laugh and say whatever, dude. But I do not like to put my finger on any sort of a trigger. I don't care if it's a bow trigger. I don't care if it's a thumb, an index finger, a hinge release. I don't care if it's a rifle trigger. I despise gloves. I
Sure.
want the feeling. I want the feeling, right? And maybe everybody agrees with that. Just I don't know. But so I've always been a hand warmer guy. I have a muff, right, or whatever, my hoodie or whatever. I keep my hands blazing hot. That way, when I come out for the shot, I have no glove or anything in the way. So
Yeah.
underrated for me is like not even archery shop related stuff.
Right.
The overrated one is though, and for me, the most overrated piece of equipment is putting a sight stabilizer on your bow.
Oh,
And
okay.
you'll laugh at this, but like that makes it substantially heavier. And maybe this is me, old 54-year-old curmudgeon. I'm not packing that in the woods. I'm not
Sure.
gonna pack that extra weight because I know how to hold a bow steady with less weight on it. And so
Right.
you would laugh if you watched me sell stabilizers. A guy come in, should I put a sidebar on my bow? No,
Yeah.
I'm selling this stuff. I got it on my wall. I'm like, why would you? And he's like,
Sure.
well, just after about a 10-minute discussion, even though I try not to sell it, they still buy it. So
Yeah, yeah.
I fully understand how I could try not to sell it, but I'm still going to sell it anyway. But I think
Sure.
that's the most overrated piece of equipment on a bow is a sight stabilizer. And you can argue with me all you want, anybody out there, but I just don't think you need that to be packing that weight, chasing an elk 7 miles a day, 9 days, because I think you should be able to learn how to hold the bow steady without that weight on there.
Yeah, you
I
can
think you need some stabilization, but I don't think you need a target rig on your hunting bow, and that's
yeah.
kind of becoming vogue. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say,
No. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that one, dude. And also like it's good to note that, you can just figure out how to mitigate it without the extra crap hanging off of your bow. Oh, dude,
absolutely,
I'm a fan of that across gear because I'm a victim of
yeah,
it. If stuff's complicated, I'm like 100% going to fuck it up. You know what I mean? So it's I'm
yeah,
with you. I'm with you on that, dude. Well,
yeah.
Jeremy, dude, where can people follow you?
So on Instagram, Muley Mojo,
Okay.
and I've got kind of that's and I'm still working on it. I just got I down there's a place in Arizona called iMemories, and I've got all these videotapes that I video mule deer and stuff over all my life, and they date back to I didn't even know the names of the cassettes anymore, the
Okay.
old ones, right? And so I've got all that stuff back, and it's starting to come back to me, which was really cool. So anyway, my personal Instagram, I didn't start it to have it be anything else except for my personal hunting album
Sure.
because paper's going away. You don't go to the photo develop place anymore and develop photos and stuff. Photo albums
Right.
are a thing of the past. I'm like, well, how can I capture this stuff for my kids, grandkids, anybody that wants to look? And for me, it's for me most I can look down at, right? So that
Sure.
Muley Mojo Instagram is just kind of my life's work in mule deer, and it's still going because I got a lot of videos from the old days. I'm gonna start posting up from
Yeah,
those
yeah.
old videotapes. But it's animals I've killed. I haven't even put hardly any of my archery kills. I've shot a lot of nice mule deer with a bow, and they're not even up there yet. But little by little, I put them up. So if people dig looking at mule deer and stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there, and then on my archery shop, you're gonna laugh at this. I don't have a website. We do have an Instagram for our archery shop, but we're not very good at using it. Being that I've done this 34 years in my region, like I pulled out of the phone book and everything because it's too much.
Yeah, you're
Like God
busy.
has blessed me with too much work. Yeah. So like the Instagram page is not going to, if they go to Expert Archery _ pro shop is what it's called. No E at the front, just XPERT. they'll see some stuff on there, but the Muley Mojo, they're going to really enjoy that a lot more.
Okay,
So
cool. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's where they can really follow you and follow the big the big deer thing, dude. And I think
right.
that throws back to one of the reasons guys get obsessed with big deer, Jeremy. Like it's weird. I hate to admit, dude. Like I remember all the big Eastman bucks. Like I remember their names.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? You know
Oh, absolutely.
all of
Mike Brownlee,
yeah,
Larson's.
yeah,
Uh,
all Larson's like big bucks of the Hickorea and all that stuff. Like, dude, when I mean,
yep.
I grew up watching those DVDs. Like the first time I met Larson in real life, it was like meeting Michael Jordan.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Just because
Absolutely.
I'd watched all the big bucks of the Hickorea stuff, and so you can get obsessed with that stuff. And
I still have those, and I wore those out. And
yeah,
our buddy in Idaho, Steve, I can't remember Steve's last name. I should know it, but he was putting out lowland muleys, and then Mike Brownlee did a bunch, Eastman's did a bunch, Larson jumped in. Yeah, I
sure,
wore those out. Dude. I wore them out.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
when I think it's because you get to kind of know the Bucks, you know what I mean, and they are just majestic, you know. So awesome,
yeah.
Jeremy. Hey, dude, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, Cliff. Thank you. It's been great talking to you for sure.
Thanks, man. If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.